Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85. You know me as that niche sports connoisseur, college basketball aficionado. Here we are, smack dab in the middle of conference tournament championship week. We have all day basketball from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed. And honestly, we don't even really truly sleep. If you subscribe to that John Rothsteinism, and who doesn't, we sleep in May, and sometimes we don't even sleep till later than that because of TBT, WNBA, and all this other niche sports stuff that we're going to be covering. Lots of fun things happening. This is a absolute crazy season of college basketball, and it's only going to get more wild here. We have seen a ton of parity. We have seen underseeded teams already pulling upsets in their respective conference tournaments. We've been seeing some earth-shattering type of performances. We've been seeing some bricks, everything in between. Absolutely phenomenal stuff happening. Tomorrow, we have a 7-game early slate that we're going to delve into and a 12-game main. There's also the 7-game night slate. 7 of those 12 games from the main are going into that night slate, so it's not a separate slate altogether. What we'll be doing here is covering the 7-game early slate, game by game, tried and true method. We'll be talking about anyone we feel is underpriced, overpriced, any sneaks, overall good plays, DVP spots, price points that we can obviously build around in a balanced fashion, maybe studs and scrubs. All of that stuff we're going to be talking about at the very end. We'll provide a 2 to 3 player core to use in any and all formats. We'll also talk a little bit about PrizePicks and any and all betting opportunities that may come up. Lots of fun things happening indeed. And before you know it, it's going to be Selection Sunday. The rest of this week is going to absolutely fly by. Still opportunities to qualify for the Mania on DraftKings. There is that chatter, rumors, murmurs, if you will, about a Survivor rolling back out. That's going to be huge if that's the case. And of course, as we've talked about the last couple of nights, we are going to be offering a bracket contest for FTN subs and for the entire public as well. Even if you're not an FTN sub, we will have a separate bracket league that is for the CBB Supershow. There'll be prizes that are given for that. We're also going to be doing some draft leagues, drafting players from teams in the tournament. I'll be taking part of the RotoWire League that's going on, and there's just a ton of overall content that we're going to be offering. Lots of exciting stuff, not only tonight, but we'll be back Friday night, Saturday night, and of course on Selection Sunday, a couple of minutes before the start time there. We'll be talking live, breaking down seeds, pairings, any relevant DFS type of stuff going on, betting opportunities, and overall just chopping it up, talking with you guys, having special guests, and just talking college basketball in general. Can hardly wait. I'm extremely excited. We're going to get right into this one here. If you're new to the show, I want to welcome you. Please hit that like button to help support us. And if you're a veteran of the show, you have your seat, you have your donut, your coffee, whatever it is you bring to the table, which is a lot. I do support and appreciate that a lot, just the way you support and appreciate me as well. Let's all come together, hit that like button. Let's support one another. Let's get those green screens, those window trips. Let's make that money. Let's get that appliance money. As my good friend Jamie told me, we need to lean into this. Dylan Dessou making us this washer and dryer money. We have to get a new Dylan Dessou this year. Who might that be? Time will tell. My wife has some more appliances that we need to buy. We need to identify who that appliance winner is going to be for us, and we're going to do so. Let's get into the slate right away. Boom, let's talk about it. 7-game early slate. If you're wondering about contests, the 2K to first pull-up jumper is the flagship tournament. There's also a myriad of different 50, 100, 150s, 2-2s, all that kind of stuff, winner-take-alls. On the 12-game main, that's where you'll see bracket qualifier number 58. It's crazy to think we're almost done. We're almost to the end, so if you haven't qualified yet, still a few more opportunities, but it is running out really, really quickly. All right, first game on the slate that we're going to talk about, Florida State versus Virginia Tech. This comes with a total of 153. The Hokies are 3-point favorites. Florida State, traditionally under Coach Leonard Hamilton, has been a frustrating team for DFS purposes. Not as much in the past. We've been able to identify a player that we can use, whether that's Trent Forrest, Terrence Mann, the legendary Mifiando Kabengele. some of these players in the past that we've been able to trust, and they've made us some good money. The last few seasons, we're just running a 12, 13-man rotation, and it makes it extremely difficult. Now, injuries over the past 2 seasons have really hurt this Florida State team. Not as much this season, although they did lose some players early, and they've had some guys in and out. But really, this rotation that Leonard Hamilton is running is extremely frustrating. And I really don't understand why Primo Spears, who surprisingly got a waiver this season, isn't in that starting lineup and isn't playing 30-plus minutes. Because clearly, to me and everybody else watching, he's one of the best guards out there on this team and has the potential to be one of the best guards in the ACC. Perhaps that's a little bit of hyperbole on my part, but I'm the king of doing that. And I have guys that I really like, I support, and Primo Spears is definitely one of those guys. Now, when it comes to Florida State, there's really only one player that we can look at for our main builds and trust, and that's going to be the most expensive player on the slate. Go figure. Jameer Watkins, I shouldn't say on the slate, on Florida State, I should say. 8.5K. He has been extremely consistent, one of the few on this team who is getting 30-plus minutes, and he absolutely wrecked shop against the Miami Hurricanes in their season finale. 16 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals. Really liked him in that matchup. Came in extraordinarily low owned. I expect that to be the case here in this one as well. Much tougher matchup against Virginia Tech. We got the neutral court. He's priced up at 8.5, but somebody who is definitely capable of putting up 30-plus, and I don't think he'll be off the court very long. Hamilton will rotate everyone else, but I think we see Watkins play 36, 37 minutes. There is no tomorrow. We're in the one-game season. It's win and advance, survive and advance, lose, and you're going home. And there's no postseason at play for the Florida State Seminoles unless they accept a CBI bid or something like that, which I highly doubt. So it's win or the season is over for this team. Interesting fact, Jameer Watkins is a COVID junior/senior, did not participate in their senior day festivities. Sounds like he'll be back. So we'll get more Jameer Watkins next season, which is a good thing for everybody who plays DFS and or bets on props. Outside of Watkins, you have Primo Spears. He's under 5K, sitting there at 4.9. I think this is the time to throw him in there and take a shot. Large field GBPs especially, nobody's going to play Primo Spears as he doesn't start and his minutes are erratic. They go from 12 to 20 to 25. He has hit 30 a few times early on, but this would be a game in which that could possibly happen. Despite the fact that he's not a starter, despite the fact that he's not playing these huge minutes, he has an extraordinarily high shot rate, 28.4%. That is highest on the team. His usage rate is just a tick behind Jameer Watkins at 27.3%. Has an assist rate of 19%, a steal rate of 3%, draws 4.5 fouls per 40. The only thing that he doesn't do is shoot 3 balls very well, 27% there, but he knows how to get others involved. And if this turns into a close game, Primo Spears, I believe, will be out there in crunch time. And if Florida State has a lead and it turns into a foul game, you're looking at the opportunity for him to rack up a quick 4, 5, 6 points late. That 4.9 price just seems way too low. And you saw today on the various slates, people, as far as chalk went, just went with the underpriced guys, regardless of matchup or how poorly they've been playing. Jamiron Keller on early, Kion Williams. Williams ended up going off. Keller didn't. Jalen Sellers, who has been struggling mightily the last month and a half of the season. And you're seeing all these guys had something in common. They are priced between 4.5 and 5.5. Primo Spears is in that range, but there's going to be other guys on this slate that I think people gravitate towards more. If it's hard up for value, might we see Spears get some ownership? Perhaps, but I do think he's a relatively sneaky value that does have major upside here in this spot, and I think he placed his season high 4 minutes. That is what I think. Anyone else? You have Baba Miller at 5.9. He's really not that appealing of an option. Limited offensively. Out there for his defense majority of the time. Darren Green doesn't do a lot peripherals wise. He does take a ton of shots. You saw he dropped a absolute hammer on Miami, 8 for 15 from long range. He took 16 shots. 15 of those were from beyond the arc, put up 41. He's going to have to shoot incredibly well and have tons of volume to pay off this 6K price. Not that high on him. And the same with Cam Corhin. Worry about foul trouble with him. He did explode against Pittsburgh. Had some struggles against Miami, but one thing to pay attention to here is he's played 30-plus minutes in 3 straight games. We're seeing some guys ascend and playing these larger minutes Hamilton is playing, and he's rotating out that other spot, whether that's Baba Miller, Jalen Wareley, sometimes it's Chandler Jackson, Bo Bowen. They're rotating out the rest. Watkins, Corin, and Primo Spears, that's the line in the sand play right there, are all going to play 30-plus minutes in this one. On the Virginia Tech side, the first order of business is Lynn Kidd, who is dealing with a hamstring issue coming into the beginning of this week. We're still there. He was expected to be very limited for this game. Now it's going to be fully available and playing and probably starting, but we will pay attention to that as the first game on the slate. We'll have that news. Perhaps they bring him off the bench. Hamstring injuries can be tricky. Those can flare up any time. I'm really a little bit worried about Ken there. He's almost $7K, so that's a tougher price to pay, even though the matchup against FSU on paper is fine. Perhaps we have a value play staring us in the face here, and most people are not even going to realize it, even if Lynn Kidd plays, even if Lynn Kidd starts. Mijel Poteet, who does have a relatively high foul rate himself, especially in conference play, could be looking at 20 to 25 minutes in this one. He is 4.4K and would be the main benefactor of Lynn Kidd being limited and or out. Perhaps wakes up, has something happen, goes into warmups. There is an opportunity for us here to use Poteet, and he has been fairly good on a per minute basis when it comes to racking up fantasy points. He hasn't been a consistent player with playing time all in all, but we have seen him play more the last month of the season, and his rates are actually pretty strong overall. 22% usage rate, 19.4% shot rate, a combined rebounding rate of 28%, and he's drawing nearly 5 fouls per 40. However, he is getting called for 5.1 fouls per 40 himself. Like Poteet here, definitely some risk, sub 5K. That risk is mitigated to a degree. You also have Tyler Nickel, who's there at 4.9. He was on fire in the middle part of the conference season, was just unbelievable how well he was playing, fell off hard, had to play more against Notre Dame, did look good, hit a couple of threes, put up 15 and 4, sub 5K, in line for 20-plus minutes. Tyler Nickel does have guard forward eligibility. That is another value play that we can look to. You also have Robbie Barron at 5.2. He would be a main benefactor next to Poteet. He's going to play minutes regardless if Kidd is in or not, but the opportunity on the glass will be there for Barron. He was outstanding against Louisville, and he was relatively strong against Notre Dame too. Despite the fact that he scored just 2 real points and shot 1 for 6, he still put up 22, which would be value at this 5.2 price point. 1 steal, 3 blocks, 3 assists, and 6 rebounds. His peripherals have been strong lately. Kind of wrote off Robbie Barron there for the end of the conference season leading up to that Louisville game. He had been very lackadaisical, not doing much. He was losing minutes to Poteet. Now all of a sudden we're seeing him trending in the right direction, and he is a very good overall play at 5.2. For that kind of money, I think he is a main team option potentially, and we'll see how this shakes out. For what it's worth, it is a larger slate than we just had at 7 games. We can wait. We can see if there's any surprise news. We can, check for starters, see if there's anything that's going to happen. Keep our PMR open, which has been a profitable move for the all-day slates. But when it comes down to it, I do think we want to take one of these value pieces, whether that's Barron, Nickel, or Poteet. I do envision one of them ending up on the optimal here, at least at this time, 10:15 on the West Coast on March 12th. Now, I might feel different as we load into lock tomorrow morning after I've had about 2.5 hours of sleep, but as of now, that is how I feel. The Hunter Couture Sean Padula combo is very strong. Couture's only priced at 6.4. Now, he had an astronomically successful game against Wake Forest. Everyone does. Very, very weak against Louisville and Notre Dame, 2 very weak opponents. Didn't do well. Peripherals aren't there for Couture. He's going to have to be shooting and making a ton of shots. Very similar to Darren Green in that regard. So even though Couture looked good to people at 6.4, I don't know if he's quite there as a main team look, more so of a GBP type of play. He fits in there with the more balanced approach that we like to lean on, but I don't think I'm comfortable enough to go there in my main lineup just because if he has a bad shooting night, he's not going to make it, or I should say a bad shooting morning. Sean Padula is finally, after 4 or 5 months of the season of being underpriced the entire year, Sean Padula is finally priced at a level where he probably should be. He's even overpriced to a degree at 8.6, nearly 9K. We've had a lot of good times with Padula this year, priced at 5.5 and 5.4, 6K, 6.6, just absolutely destroying those price points. Has put up huge numbers to end the season. His last 5 games, he's eclipsed 32 DK points in each. He threw down a hammer against Notre Dame, 28 points, 6 rebounds, 12 of 21, made no threes. All of his points coming on free throws or 2-point field goals. He has been very, very good. If you have the salary to pay for him at 8.6, it certainly doesn't hurt to do so. It's a bit spendy. You have guys like my man on America's team here, Keon Brooks. You have Jameer Watkins, who we just talked about. We have some guys on the USC side, or perhaps you're not like me and you love Quincy Oliveri of Xavier versus Butler. So you have some pay up options here. I'm going to get the question, who's my favorite pay up every day before lock? As it stands right now, it's between Keon Brooks and probably Sean Padula at this point. That doesn't mean Sean's going to make my main lineup, but he's definitely high up there for me. This is the time of year to use guards like this, facilitators, combo guards, streaky, consistent, doesn't matter. Guards who can get it done with high upside need to be on your rosters because they absolutely crush these tournament settings. Has been that way since the Reagan administration, has been that way since dinosaurs roamed the earth. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to play high upside guards who have the ball in their hands a lot. Double check, Sean Padula does make that happen. All right, next game on the slate here. Let's keep it moving. Aaron says, today sucked, man. Bouncing back big tomorrow. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Sometimes that happens. We got to grind through it. Got Johnny in the chat here. I keyed in on Montana-Idaho State game. Got me to the window. Hey, that's what you got to do, man. You got to find your spots, pick your spots, and make things happen. All right. And if you had a bad day, Aaron, that means I had a bad day because I know our lineups were pretty similar. So that is an unfortunate turn of events. All right, moving on to the next game here, UCF versus BYU. BYU comes in as 5.5-point favorites, total of 145.5. Interesting game here. UCF grinds through. They get the win over a pretty bad Oklahoma State team. In that game, we saw a ton of just ridiculous stocks from multiple players in that one. The front court players, especially on both sides, were blocking shots, racking up steals, lots of peripherals happening. Now, BYU has players who can take advantage of that if that mirrors what we just saw. The tough part here is projections are going to like Jalen Sellers once again. He's priced at 5.5. He has solid rates overall. He is just struggling mightily, and he's playing a ton of minutes. That is a problem. So he's going to continue to be, as Gary Parrish says when he's talking about teams who maybe don't pass the eye test, but they're computer trickers, as the term he uses. Maybe Jalen Sellers is an individual player computer tricker because he's really not a play I want to use against BYU, but I do want to warn you ahead of time when the sheet comes out, he is going to project well. There's just no way around it. He's not going to play less than 32 or 33 minutes, just the way it's going to be. All right. So you can make that decision if you want to. I don't think it's a good play. Eventually, he's got to pay off that price, right? But they're running out of time here, and I don't think they're going to win. I do like CJ Walker at 4.9, another interesting play who has dropped significantly in price after being nearly 6K here today against Oklahoma State. Had a solid 12.4 rebound, 2-block outing. 4.9 definitely in the mix there for us. We're going to have several speculative values that we can use between 4.5 and 5K, and he is certainly one of them. The problem with UCF is that they have several front court options that tend to cannibalize each other. It's just a rerun of last night talking about it. Omar Payne's going to play 13 to 15 minutes. Darren Osilla is going to play typically 13 to 15 minutes, and then you're going to have Diallo over 20. You're going to have Walker over 20. Now, Diallo was outrageously good today, put up 41, but you have to keep in mind he played that 23 minutes, which is in his window. He happened to pull down 11 rebounds. He happened to block 2 shots. He got 3 steals, and he got 17 points. That 17 points was one of his highest of the year. I don't believe, without going back, he scored any time higher than that. I think his previous highest was like 14. So that was a career game, or at least a season high game for Ibrahim Diallo. Still priced too high for my liking. He actually dropped $100. Make that make sense. If people want to chase that, they certainly can. It's just not a good matchup, not a good spot to go against this BYU team that's going to be a little bit fresher, and they just have a defense capable of putting Diallo in the locker. And not a lot of people can put a big man like him in a locker. I foresee foul trouble in his future. Last time against BYU on the road, he did have 3 fouls. He did end up with 9 fantasy points. That's just not a spot we want to chase. Darius Johnson is really expensive at 8.5, solid nonetheless. He's probably the only UCF guy that has a chance to really exceed value against this BYU team, but that opportunity cost is going to be far too much. Darius Johnson has had foul issues recently as well. Didn't pick up a single one against Oklahoma State. I don't know if that'll be the case against BYU. I'm just very worried about UCF in this spot, and I don't want to utilize very many of them. If any of them end up breaking the slate, so be it. I just can't get there with them right now. On the BYU side, they run a rotation that is just ridiculously deep and makes it tough, and projections are now starting to level out on them because we have enough game logs. All of their prices are relatively cheap, and they were projecting extremely well each and every game, but we've got it pretty well watered down now that none of them are that intriguing even at these prices. Dallin Hall at 6.5, Trevin Nell all the way down at 5.2, who was a stud early in the season. Spencer Johnson's a little expensive there at 7K, so we can probably write him off. Jackson Robinson at 5.9, but he's lost his rhythm a little bit here with all these guys playing. Richie Saunders' minutes have been going down. Noah Waterman's minutes have been watered down. And we're really just only seeing the only exciting player on this team right now from a fantasy perspective is Fousseyni Traore, who doesn't play a tremendous amount of minutes, has a very high fantasy point per minute number, and has excellent rates across the board. He merely needs about 20 to 22 minutes at this price to absolutely shatter it. So at 6.4, it might seem like a lot for a guy who's playing less than 25 minutes and is really not starting anymore because of how deep they are. But he is so active when he's on the floor, and he could put up a huge number. Probably better suited for a GBP. That is understandable. Against UCF, the first time, or in their last game, a day before Valentine's Day, he only played 11 minutes. So when they were trying to figure out the rotation, he was coming back from missing some games, had just 3 fantasy points. He is playing otherworldly right now, and I do want to heat check him somewhere in at least 1 or 2 alt build lineups. All right, moving on to Notre Dame versus Wake Forest. The Irish survive. They advance. Good for them. Marcus Burton is such a stud. Wake Forest, 8.5-point favorites, total of 137. Interesting here because Wake Forest, we know we've got a lot of Wake Forest fans in our Discord. They are very good at home, have been horrible on the road. Now we've got the neutral court here. Ken Pom has it 72-63. I think Notre Dame has a chance at least to cover for sure, but possibly to win outright as well. When you look at Notre Dame, the game that they win against Georgia Tech, they gave up some pretty big numbers to Bayandongo, Nathan George. Like defensively, Notre Dame is what they are. They're not very strong, but they have Marcus Burton, and as long as he has a pulse, is not in foul trouble or injured, they're going to have a chance here in these first few games of the tournament. Love Marcus Burton. His price for some reason didn't go north. It went south. I'm not quite sure why that happened, but at 7.8, he has to be in consideration for all formats and every single lineup that you build. He was priced at 8.4 today. Gets a matchup that is definitely maybe not as good as Georgia Tech, but it's not to be fearful at all. He has scored 30-plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. He's going to play 36, 37 minutes. He's an excellent play here against this Wake Forest team, and you might just have to look back a few weeks to see the last time they played Wake Forest. He dolted them for 50, 31, 3 and 3, 4 steals, 2 of 6 from long range, took just 15 shots, which is pretty damn efficient, where he racked up points late in the game. And this is where we want to start looking at these type of things. Who's going to be in close games? Who's going to be taking free throws late? Burton was 11 for 11 at the foul line, got a lot of late free throws there, racked up his point total. Absolutely love Marcus Burton here in this spot. Like Tay Davis as well, these are some spots we can use. Efton Reed is a really good rim protector and low post defender, but I do think a guy like Tate Davis, if he stays out of foul trouble, and that might be a tall order, he was going to have a huge game against Georgia Tech today until he got into foul trouble himself. He is in a spot where he could be a nice, sneaky GBP look. Now, he was priced at almost 7K today, which made it hard to use him. But now we're staring at the barrel of a 5.5K price, and that is much easier to justify for a typically hard to fill forward spot. Absolutely love Tate Davis. I think he is a very sneaky look. Kerry Booth's not that interesting. He hasn't been very good, not playing a ton of minutes. Kevin Njai had a decent enough game today. He's only 3.9, played 33 minutes. Perhaps we can look to him for some value. I think people will gravitate to that price naturally. But I think Davis does make sense in all formats there as a sneakier look. And then you even have Braden Shrewsbury at 4.8. So they have the polar opposite. Early slate, super tight. Main slate, not so tight. And then today, for this next one, early slate, we have a lot of prices that went the wrong direction for whatever reason. Shrewsbury at 4.8. I suspect he will get a high amount of ownership. Would make a ton of sense for that to happen at 4.8. We could run a potential mini stack from Notre Dame and then maybe one or two Wake guys on the other side. This is a game stack that I certainly want to be involved with. On the Wake Forest side, Damari Monsanto has a official questionable tag, but it's really unlikely he's going to play collegiate basketball ever again. Certainly not anymore this season. I hope that's not the case, but obviously can't do anything with him. With him out, they've gone to really just a 6, sometimes 7-man rotation, with Parker Fredrickson being their primary 6-man, who's playing roughly 20 minutes a game over the last few. Not a very intriguing value option. Does a lot of fit bidding, as they say, but he is there, and you know he's going to have to get minutes, especially if somebody gets into foul trouble and needs a water break. He's their main sub. That leaves us with a starting lineup of Hunter Salas, Efton Reed, Andrew Carr, Cam Hildreth, and Kevin Boopy Miller. Prices for all of them are actually advantageous. They're a little higher than they had been in certain spots. It's like Boopy Miller, who was just an auto play for several weeks there, has fallen down a little bit. His last 2 games, he's been under 20 fantasy points. I like him for a bounce back here. He had 16, 3, and 5 against Notre Dame in their last matchup. He is priced just under 7K. Makes a lot of sense if you go to that more balanced approach. I would want Miller. He's the cheapest of the starters, and I've just been rolling him out with consistency over the last couple of weeks and really has only busted for us once out of the last 3 or 4 games that we used him. Cam Hildreth is there at 6.8. Don't hate the idea of using him as well. Strong peripherals, has taken a backseat as a scorer this season because of the addition of Hunter Salas, but he definitely has upside, and he plays 35-plus minutes. Andrew Carr at 7.1, that's too high. I don't know what he did to warrant that price. See, there's some very peculiar spots here. Now, I know he put up almost 30 against Clemson, which is very, very solid. But 7.1, when you have other guys around him for 7K, 6.8, 6.7, makes very little sense to me. With that being said, I don't think Carr will have very much ownership. You'll have a lot of leverage if you want to go there. I won't be using him, but there is some intriguing GPP upside there in terms of ownership at the very least. Hunter Salas, the high usage, high shot rate play at 7.9. He should also be priced well above 8K. He's not. He has his struggles, but the volume is there. He's going to shoot through it in true typical offensive firepower fashion. He will shoot. I love this spot for him as well. Burton versus Salas is appointment television. If you want to run a stack, those two have to be the top 2 options in any Wake Forest Notre Dame stack, and you can certainly make it happen. We don't have any 11K Zach Edey's that we have to play. We don't have a bunch of 9K plus guys. We can certainly make multiple 7 to 8K guys work in our various lineups. Salas and Burton are very high atop the list for me. And then you have Efton Reed at 7K. Foul trouble is really the only thing that can stop him from having a big game. He victimizes himself. He has a very simplistic matchup against Notre Dame. He's stronger. He's more athletic. He can get it done against that team. In 30 minutes against Notre Dame last time, a very simple 12-point, 10-rebound double-double put him at 30 fantasy points. We love it. Very, very solid. I think he's fine if you want to use him in your main lineup. Again, only thing that can stop him in himself and his foul issues. Did we want Charleston to win the CAA? I didn't really have an opinion on that. I wanted Hofstra to win the CAA. I wanted Darlingston Dubar. Stony Brook gave it a hell of a run in the CAA tournament, and they really, pushed it into overtime and very, very solid performance there by Stony. But I don't mind. I mean, Charleston has a pretty solid group. Rain Smith is just an absolute chucker. They've got a good team for the most part. I don't think they'll win a game in the tournament, though. If that's what you're looking for an angle there, I don't see them winning on one, but we'll see. We'll see how the pairings come out. All right, next game here. And then Warren asked, did you mention MJ Collins? I didn't. Try not to mention every single one, even though it seems like I do. I know he's playing a ton of minutes, and he has back-to-back games over 30 fantasy points against the likes of Notre Dame and Louisville. Only time he's priced over 6K, that's just too high for me. That's one of those spots where if I lose to MJ Collins, so be it. He has played nearly the entire game for most of the conference season. He just doesn't have the most spectacular rates. I know he's played well lately, but that's not a spot for me to chase. He's only 300 less than Hunter Couture, who hasn't been playing as good, but is a more trusted option, at least in my opinion. All right, Oklahoma versus TCU. TCU 2-point favorites, total of 145.5. This Oklahoma team, man, it is a disaster. A disaster. They have injuries galore. Javian McCollum had missed time, then comes back. Rivaldo Suarez, who is not even arguably, he has been the best player for the Sooners over the last month of the season. He is dealing with an ankle issue. He is not going to play. This is a ankle that he has been dealing with over a week or two period. He re-aggravated that in the last game. No Rivaldo Suarez for this Oklahoma team. The problem here with the Sooners is, even though the matchup is solid against this TCU team, I don't know that we can use any of them. And it's not because prices are too high or, like I said, the matchup's not bad. Porter Moser it's not even like a question that he's going to leave. There is a lot of insiders who have basically blown that one open and said that he's been wanting to get back into the Chicago area. That's to be expected. He had so much success there for many, many years with Loyola Chicago, put them on the map with that elite tournament run and all these other times that he did. Successful coach who's been all around, Arkansas, Little Rock, Illinois State. He's done well at all his stops. And he's done fairly decent for Oklahoma, as good as you could for what most people would say is a football school. They're going into a lion's den or snake den, however you want to say it, of football and SEC and all. It's just going to be very tough. It's going to be a very, very tough transition for some of these programs, and Oklahoma could struggle. And I think it makes sense for Porter, who's not have any ties to the area, to try to get back to the Chicago area. Now, it might make people say, why would he take the DePaul job? And I didn't mention that, but it sounds like Porter's going to become the new head coach of DePaul. People might say, why the hell would he ever want to go there? Well, Chicago kids need to go to DePaul. They've been going to Champaign. No disrespect to my man Scott, who loves Illinois. They've been taking all the Chicago kids. I think DePaul, they have the fan base, believe it or not. They've got a lot of resources and they just need to put a semi-winning team together there early. I think Porter can do that with the transfer portal like it is for at least another couple seasons. COVID year, one more season before that drops off. There's plenty of talent to go rebuild that team. It makes a lot of sense for him to go to Paul, where he's going to have a longer leash, knows the area, and will get an opportunity to turn things around there. So with that being said, that obviously gets around to everyone, players included. How much do they care about knowing that their coach is going to leave? Some probably don't, like Otego Awe. Some probably really do, like Jalen Moore. Some of them aren't going to be around. There were several seniors on this team that Oklahoma roster is going to turn over drastically. Everything to me says that this is a lame duck game on the Sooner side. I never want to question a team. I was worried about Miami not giving effort today. A lot of us were. Norchad Omier did his thing, and Nigel Pack did his thing. But we saw Luka Poplar. He was hobbled. Like the overall Miami, just they really, I think they wanted the year to be done. And I think the Sooners are probably close to that. And the fact that Suarez is now out, that's really tough. With that being said, that long-winded kind of analysis, I don't want to utilize much Oklahoma. I really like the way Jalon Moore is playing. Who wouldn't? He scored 30 plus DK points in 4 of his last 5 games. He is the most expensive he's been all season at 7.6. He is going up against a TCU front court that doesn't really scare anybody in the grand scheme of things. So there is upside there for him. Not too sure. The Sooners offense, it's real lackluster. We see the cheap guards who definitely have appeal. Javion McCollum, who I really like, Milo Suzanne, Otega Awe, Latrey Darthard. They're struggling still at these prices to even make value. It's just a really difficult situation. With Suarez out, at least we know Darthard is going to probably have to play 30-plus minutes. He is a value at 4.7, so there's that. Javion McCollum at 5.8. That's an interesting price for him, but this is just a real awkward spot here to look at any Sooners. TCU side is probably the way we want to go. Emmanuel Miller at 7.7 and Jameer Nelson at 7.2. Those are the primary 2 options for TCU. With Nelson back starting, he's playing consistent minutes again, and he contributes from all categories, isn't just reliant on his scoring like someone like Trevian Tennyson was. So that's where I want to go if I'm targeting TCU guys. And they fit that more balanced approach to lineups that we really want to kind of look to on this slate. Other guys beyond those 2, Micah Peavy's a relatively cheap 5.8K. Give us 20 plus. I think he can do that. He's been rather erratic, but you look at it, the minutes and the volume and the usage has still been there for Micah Peavy. So that is still good for us. Has his high steal rate. He can rack up peripherals in a hurry. Has a good shooting night. He can turn that 5.8 into a very, very big 5x plus score. GPP wise, even though Ernest Uday is back and he did play 24 minutes against UCF and he looked fairly solid, you may be tempted to use him. I don't mind that if you want to use him. It does look like they're committed to playing him 20 plus minutes. I still like Jacoby Coles. The problem is he's priced at 5.6. Minutes were good against UCF. He played 25, but I don't know if we can count on that. Usually he's in that 15 to 20 range. And now that he's knocking on the door of 6K, more so just kind of a GPP all deep type of play. Has high upside. Fantasy point per minute numbers are good. Usage rates are good. I do like Jacoby Coles, but not really going to be a priority play in any sense of the word. And then we have Avery Anderson, who has gone through ups and downs all season. He's priced cheaply at 5.3. I think there's merit to using him in a GPPs. He is not somebody that we can count on for our main builds, regardless if he's in the starting lineup or not. And when you look at that last loss at UCF, which was a pretty tough one, Anderson did start, but they ended up going to Coles, Tennyson, Chuck O'Bannon. He was the one that continued to get subbed out there, and he was struggling, not taking shots. It almost seemed like Anderson was lacking confidence on the offensive end, and that certainly is a problem. All right, next, let's go to the next one. I was going to mention Trevian Tennyson. I think we see his minutes go back up. He's there at 5K. He's really unappealing to me. He has to knock down shots. The volume may not be there. The price is cheap. If he jumped back into the starting lineup, then I would say, yeah, maybe we can use Tennyson. But it does look like Coach Dixon is committed to Jameer Nelson and Avery Anderson as their starters, and Uday back has boxed out Xavier Court. Can't use him. It's just going to be that starting group of PV, Miller, Nelson, Uday, and Anderson, Coles and O'Bannon, and Tennyson off the bench. Certainly an okay look there for TCU guys if you want to utilize some of them. All right, next game on the slate is a Pac-12, the final iteration of the Pac-12, Washington versus USC. The Trojans are 1-point favorites. There's been a couple of fluctuations there. I saw it at 2 earlier. Total of 153.5. That is officially the highest total on the slate. This USC team, it's been a very disappointing season for them. We were talking about disappointing teams last night. USC does come up when you ask people about disappointing programs, but not as much as Michigan State and some of the others. But this has to be seen as a colossal failure of a year for the Trojans. Andy Enfield has them at 14-17. The good news is they have been heating up at the right time. They've dealt with a myriad of injuries. They were missing Collier for a bit. They were missing Boogie for a bit. They've had no true post presence to speak of all year long. but they have won 4 of their last 5 games, which includes a road win against America's team, the Washington Huskies, by a score of 82-75. The trio of Isaiah Collier, Kobe Johnson, and Boogie Ellis is playing extremely well. This is a phenomenal spot for them. Looking at it overall, Washington Huskies defensively, they leave a little something to be desired. Their system makes 0 sense. Mike Hopkins is officially on his way out. They're letting him coach here in this tournament game. We'll see how that works out. Pepperdine, who let go of Lorenzo Romar, they let him coach in it, and you could see there was some tension there. Don't think that'll be the case here for the Huskies, but I also don't think that they're going to really be fired up from a perspective of Mike Hopkins on the way out. They're playing at the 30th fastest tempo. I think this game ends up going way over. I think you're seeing both teams score in the 80s. And I do think the Huskies are alive to win this, not as some kind of rallying point for Mike Hopkins, just because like the program has been stuck in the mud for so long. This is the end for Keon Brooks and Severe Wheeler. They're going to want to extend their seasons, I think, and they're going to want to keep their collegiate careers going. So this is going to be a war of a game. I'm very excited to watch this one. I think it's absolutely live for overtime. I think we see a hotly contested game all throughout the entire time within 2 to 3 points. This is a perfect environment that we want to target various players. USC and Washington's top players are all expensive, so we're going to have to figure out how to do this, but we can definitely walk away with 3 pieces from this one and feeling like we didn't make too much sacrifices throughout. In the USC 82-75 win, Kobe Johnson had 6 points, but 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals, 2 blocks. He has been putting up some God-tier level peripherals. Offensively, he's not that skilled, but he has been putting up some huge scores thanks to his ability to fill out a stat sheet. Boogie Ellis had 17 and 4. Isaiah Collier had 31 points. We could not stop him for anything in that game. 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, but he was just relentlessly scoring. He hit 3 threes, but a lot of those were from attacking over and over and over again. And shockingly enough, scoring 31 points, he had 0 free throw attempts. You don't see that very often. Typically, you see guys at least attempt some free throws when they're scoring 30-plus points. DJ Rodman also had a nice game of 17 and 6. And their bench contributed a little bit. Keon Brooks had 20 and 7. Severe Wheeler, 10 points, 5 assists. The perimeter defense of the Trojans has been strong, especially with Kobe Johnson. They locked up Severe Wheeler. I do think it's a tough spot to go to him, and they did a pretty nice job. No, they didn't. Corin Johnson absolutely raked them over the coals. 21 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. Corin Johnson, of course, is a program all-timer. I can say that about him now. He's going to stay. He's going to be one of the best. Very excited about him. Can we use him in this spot? Perhaps not, but I'm certainly going to want some exposure. Now, he's priced at 7.6K, which makes things extremely difficult. But he followed up the near 40 against USC, and they beat the Cougars last game of the season. That's a feel-good story for everyone. 23 points, 4 assists, a steal, on his way to 34 fantasy points. But his highs are going to be around 30 to 35, and they've got him priced so high at 7.6. It's just so difficult to get there. And again, the matchup isn't great, but he torched USC before, so I'm not really worried about that. That's going to be a hard play to get to. If you're going to play a Husky guy and you have salary, Keon Brooks is the way you want to go. I don't think that we're looking at a super high scoring slate by any means. I think it's going to be average. Raw points, maybe not a super premium as it is to get 4x, 5x value, but I do think Keon Brooks is going to be coming in here, putting up 40 plus, and we're going to see him play just about every single minute possible. Love Keon Brooks. It's just a very expensive price, so I get it, but he is definitely one of, and I mentioned this earlier, my favorite pay-ups on the slate. 27.5% shot rate, 26% usage rate, shooting 40% from long range, and he does have a fouls drawn rate of nearly 6. He doesn't typically, knock on wood, get into foul trouble. He's usually the one getting others into foul trouble, and that USC front court, as I mentioned, it's really not that scary. Josh Morgan gets into trouble. He plays 18 to 20 minutes. He's rather weak. Vincent Uchukwu, who is the 7-footer, he's strong, but he's got a high foul rate himself. And if those two aren't doing well, there's really nowhere for them to turn. The youngster, Arinton Page, is banged up right now, and this is an opportunity for them to absolutely torch in the lane. And that means Keon Brooks scoring from inside and out, unguardable by the USC front court. And perhaps we see Corin Johnson and Severe Wheeler end up getting some drives once they get past their perimeter defenders. Where USC makes their money is through their perimeter defense. That's going to be tough, but this might be one of those games where Braxton Mia comes back into play. Speaking of Braxton Mia, his price is an affordable 5.3K. It got a little bit wacky there over 6K. Not really in love with that. Now, he did struggle against USC in their first meeting. He only played 20 minutes. I think this is a game, barring foul trouble, we see him get back up closer to 30. And when he gets close to 30, he absolutely erupts. You saw against a tough UCLA club in which they scored 94 on, 19-8, had 5 blocks. He was just relentless against them. Against ASU, another team with a lackluster front court, 13 points, 14 rebounds, 35 fantasy points. He's really cheap. I think a safe projection minutes-wise is probably mid-20s. That could go either way, though. 2 quick fouls wouldn't shock me. Makes it the whole way, plays 30 minutes, also wouldn't shock me. So it just comes down to risk tolerance there and if you believe he's going to be able to stay on the court. Wheeler is cheaper than Corin Johnson. That's interesting. It's just by 200. Wheeler started the season on fire. He ballooned in price and then kind of just fell by the wayside. Nobody in the industry really talking about him or using him. Was really cheap on that last slate. 7.4 is an ordinary price for him. I don't mind it. I don't envision a way that I can get there because I am prioritizing Keon Brooks, who's I know more expensive, but that's just the way I'm going to play it and how I want to go. There's enough cheaper guys at the guard spot where I don't have to force Severe Wheeler in a bad spot overall. On the USC side, I definitely want one of their top 3 guards, and I might even consider DJ Rodman, although he is really expensive at 7.4, and that's a little bit tough, even though he's playing some of the best basketball of his life right now. So that leaves us with an 8.3 Kobe Johnson as the most expensive player on the Trojans. How about that? Probably didn't think that would ever be the case. 2 of his last 3 games, all over 35 fantasy points. He has been just ridiculous. And his last 2 against Arizona State and Arizona, he's actually scoring, hitting threes and getting to the foul line, which makes him even more dangerous. But I don't know that I can, in good conscience, use him over a cheaper Boogie Ellis at 7.5 or Isaiah Collier at 800. Now, it's only 300. It's not a huge difference, but I do prefer Collier there for that slight discount because of his high usage and his ability to score 20+ in a favorable matchup like this in which he already cooked the Huskies once. But ultimately, it's going to come down to Boogie Ellis, who I think is slightly underpriced at 7.5, coming off a poor game against Arizona. He had a monster game against Arizona State, 28 points on 8 of 12 shooting. He knocked down 6 triples. In the game against the Huskies, he had 17 of 4, put him right about 24, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world at 7.5, but I do think he has a great opportunity to be the highest scoring player on USC for a cheaper price overall. So that's where I'm going to go. I think matchup wise, you could use any of them. If you have the salary to go to Johnson or Collier and you feel better about that, by all means do so. I think all of them will end up having fairly good games either way. Now, outside of what I guess I can call it the core 4 of Rodman, Ellis, Collier, and Johnson, you have everybody else on the team under 5K. Now, we've messed with Vincent Uchukwu a bit in the past. He's had some decent games, but minutes-wise, he's all over the place, and he's a fouler. So we can't really get there in our main. Josh Morgan is really cheap. Coming into the season, a lot of people thought he was going to take another step forward. That hasn't happened. Foul issues, his minutes are all over the place. So even at 4.5, Morgan's just a guy that you can't really trust. Can't use him in anything besides maybe some alt GBP builds, large field. There's just no sense of consistency there or comfort level that I have with him right now at this point. All right, next game on the slate is going to be Xavier versus Tubby. Hell of a day for the bankroll. Let's keep rolling. Thank God, as a Louisville fan, the pain is over. Did he get canned? Did they let him go? Not surprised. I know that was coming up. I knew they would wait for it. I've been not following the slate. I've been working on notes and stuff, so I haven't seen that. But I don't know if you guys saw the video of the fan, that old guy in the stands. I thought that was you, Tubby, for a minute, talking about one more year, and everybody was booing him. I thought that was pretty comical. But yeah, good for it. Sucks for him as it tarnishes his legacy because he's so overly popular, but this is a good thing to show people that just because you were a popular player and good for the community, the program, the city, all of that doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to be a head coach or that it's going to work out. I think some of these first time head coaches, like they got to have a veteran associate head coach or assistant or somebody that maybe knows the X's and O's a little bit. Because case in point, that just didn't work out. And I'm actually shocked that he recruited so horribly. Like coming into it, the whole hype there was like, oh my God, we're going to get all these kids over Kentucky. We're going to keep all of these, Kentucky kids. We're going to pull whoever we want in the transfer portal. They got some guys in the portal, but my God, last year you run the whole season with one point guard. And Hersey Miller has to run point at times. Like that's just completely inexcusable. So yeah, I'm glad that you had a good day, and I'm glad that you're fired up about Louisville moving on to their next step, which at one point was rumored to be Eric Musselman. I don't know if that's the case anymore, but that would be kind of weird. All right, Xavier versus Butler. This is another game that we want to stack up. Xavier's a 1-point favorite, total of 150.5. This is an easy one to get excited about, and these two teams just played a few days ago, so we can look back. It was last Wednesday, and look at that game. It was a 72-66 win in favor of Butler. In that game, our man Des Cloud had a struggle, turned it over 6 times, came off a pretty good game, still had a 30% usage rate in that game, and I do like him in this spot again, no surprise. Had 17 points, 3 rebounds, 2 steals. Davion McKnight had 13 and 6, and Quincy Olivari had 13 and 9. Overall, the Xavier offense just got stunted, and Butler did their job. Defensively, Posh Alexander did his job, and he had a monster performance. I believe this was the game after he busted. Everybody jumped off of him, and he had a huge game. 35 minutes, 16 points, hit a couple of threes. Anytime Posh hits a three, I'm excited. 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, 4 steals. Just a mammoth game. Jamil Telfort played 39 minutes, had 18 and 6. Pierre Brooks had 14, and DJ Davis had 11, 2, and 3. So looking at the various prices here, starting with Xavier, my same spiel on Xavier, I want to take the cheapest of their top 3. If that's Des Cloud or if that's Davion McKnight, Quincy Olivari, that's the one I want to take. Now, it's rarely, if ever, Quincy Olivari. He's always priced at this 8.6 or 9.5. Like, he's just too expensive all the time. He can score in droves, and it makes sense for him to be I don't think he'll be popular, but he makes sense as a top option on this slate in terms of payups because he's going to take 20-plus shots. There's no doubt in my mind. If we got a shot attempt prop, which we won't get, like, he's taking 20 shots. Now, Posh did a fairly decent job at times on him. Telfort got out then on him. And he still had, a decent game, 29 fantasy points. But at 8.7, you're going to need a whole hell of a lot more than that. And I just feel like the Butler perimeter defense can harass him enough into some poor shots to where, yeah, he's going to take 20 shots, but maybe he makes 6. So we'll see how that works out. Davion McKnight at 8.2. That price scares me on him. He's had back-to-back solid games. Over the last 5, really, he's been rock solid. High assist rate. And he's gotten involved offensively a lot more over the last month of the season. Don't hate that idea either. But at 7.6, we get Des, or 7.3, we get Des. That's just far too cheap. Now, we've had him at under 7K the last 5 or 6 games. He's had a string of really easy matchups, Georgetown, DePaul, and the Marquette games. But against Butler, again, he got forced into a bunch of turnovers, took 14 shots, and overall out there for 35 minutes. This is going to be a guy, barring any unforeseen foul trouble, is going to play most of the game. And I think all 3 of their top options will. So just take the cheaper option here. And we know upside-wise, Des can put up 50. No doubt about that. But his floor can be very, very poor. Below 10. We've seen that before. So perhaps a little bit of risk there, but the price is definitely right on him. Now, where it gets really interesting is the value in the front court for Xavier because they're really cheap, but maybe not so trustworthy. In that close loss, 86-82, the Tyler Kolek-less Marquette, we saw Kachi Enzai, the exciting freshman, he played just 10 minutes. They ended up playing the other freshman, Lazar Dakovic, 33 minutes. He is more of a threat offensively. And Gaitis Nemakaisa played 21. Abu Osaman played 16, had early foul trouble, which is pretty common for him. Did have 6 rebounds, but only played that 16 minutes. That has caused their prices both to be real cheap. Enzai's just there at 4.7. Now, prior to last game, he played 22 plus minutes. And if he remains a starter, have to at least consider him there at that sub 5K price. Abu is where I'm really intrigued because that 5-1 price, he projects extremely well if we give him anything over 20 minutes. Has to not pick up these dumb fouls that he's been getting. Has to be able to, go up cliche, straight up. Had a fairly solid game against Butler in that prior matchup. He pulled down 10 rebounds, and he also took 9 shots, ended up with 20 fantasy points. At 5-1, if he can give us 20 and we feel good about it, I think we have to use him. I think their upside is way too high for him as well. You haven't seen it recently, but he did have a game against Providence in which he put up 38. He had a game against Villanova where he put up 26, and an earlier matchup against Butler all the way back on January 16th, 9 points, 11 rebounds. That equated to 30. He has performed very well against his Butler team. Neutral court, Butler's front court, really besides Jalen Thomas, who also gets into foul trouble in his own right, they don't have a lot of other options. Both of these teams have been weak in the front court, but Obu should be able to take advantage. This is another one of those situations where they're not going to beat him. He's going to beat himself, but he is a significantly cheap price at 5-1 that I think people might galaxy brain and overlook him to an extent. Maybe if that means they're going to go Enzai instead, but I do like Abu quite a bit here in this spot, and I'm really considering using him as a primary core option. We'll see if that ends up being the case tomorrow before lock. Lazar Dakovic is 3.5K, played 33 minutes. If he starts, I guess we can consider him. Like I said, he's better offensively. He adds more to the game than Kachi does on that end. And he's started earlier in the season. Near min price, it's fine, but I think you're chasing a little bit. And honestly, less than 20 minutes is probably like 80% higher chance than him playing 33 again. So we'll temper expectations there. Dallin Swain, obviously out for the rest of the season. So that's a big patch of minutes that are going to continue to go around. And then Sasa Siani, who's typically a 15 to 20 minute player as well, still dealing with the leg issue. There is going to be a lot of bench minutes available for these guys and some of these secondary options. Butler side, Posh Alexander. Who else would we talk about? 8.1K. It's expensive. I love it because it's so high that it's going to keep people away. Everybody's going to be away. No one's going to use Posh Alexander on this slate. I think this is one of the highest prices, not only this season, but of all time for him over 8K. It's very rare for this to happen. We are in win or go home time. He's going to have to play 36, 37 minutes. We just saw him deliver a 40 against this Xavier team. And yes, you can call it a chase if you want to, but there's hardly, I shouldn't say hardly, there is no bigger fan than Posh Alexander individually than me. And especially not being anywhere near the areas that he plays basketball. I can say on this side of the country, I am the biggest Posh Alexander fan. So I'm biased, but he is absolutely an essential play to me. I don't care what price he is. The stocks, blocks, and steals upside is astronomically high. He's going to force those Xavier guards into some bad spots. He's rebounding at a high level all throughout the Big East season. We know he's got a high assist rate. It's been the scoring. The scoring has been what has held back Posh for his entire career. 3-point shooting especially. What we need him to do is attack the rim and generate offense at the free throw line and build up his confidence. If he settles for threes early, we'll be in trouble because he does end up playing a bit scared on the offensive end. If he misses the first couple of shots, you'll see him just not shoot. Hate that happens, but that's just the way it plays out. But when he's attacking, he's getting to the line, he's seeing a few easy ones go down, then we're seeing a more confident Posh Alexander on the offensive end. And that's when he's especially dangerous because he's going to load up on peripherals. There's no doubt. He's going to get 20 baseline on just assists, rebounds, blocks, and steals. If we can get a replica 15 to 16 point performance out of him, he's putting up 40 again. He's putting up 40 again. So before you ask me, this is vintage right here. Before you ask me today, tonight, tomorrow, whenever before lock, who's the Posh play of the day? Let me just stop you and tell you the original Posh play of the day is Posh Alexander. He will carry the designation for his namesake. I don't expect him to have much ownership whatsoever. I'm going to be all in on Posh Alexander. I would have it no other way. And I think you guys appreciate that about me. Line in the sand time, Posh Alexander, all in. Let's go. Other options that make sense. Jamil Telfort going to play most of the game as our super editor, Adam. I said super before anyone says I called him a name. Super editor, a great guy. I love him. Calls Jamil Telfort the best player in the world because he tends to have these massive, 10, 15 fantasy point streaks in 5 minutes. Really good option. Obviously, he hammered out Xavier in their last game. Definitely a solid option. He's just on the floor a lot, has great overall rates. Pierre Brooks, I don't like because he is strictly just going to be a shooter. Now, he had that game, what was it? I think it was early February against Marquette where he just couldn't miss a shot. And he ended up just like blowing up hard. He's just limited to this 20 to 25 fantasy point range. If he were ever to get below 6K, that would be prime territory to use him. But offensively, all of his points have to come from scoring. He's just not going to do enough of anything else. However, he takes a ton of shots, and he's an absolute certified chucker, and he's liable to take 10 plus threes. So there is that. Do love DJ Davis at 6K. If I'm using two Butler, it's not going to be Telfort and Posh, not just because pricing probably won't allow that, but because I think DJ Davis has a really big game here against Xavier as well. He shot 4 for 11 against Xavier in their last one, and he only put up 18.5, priced at a very reasonable 6K. Now, he also only played 24 minutes in that game. Typically, we're used to seeing him play 30 plus. I expect that to be the case here in this spot in the Big East tournament. And I think we see him get back to taking 15 plus shots, perhaps. He's going to be hitting some threes, getting confident. He surprisingly, some people don't realize, has a pretty solid assist rate, and he's been rebounding quite well for a guy his size. So definitely like DJ Davis. If we're stacking this game, he's second for me behind Posh Alexander. Jalen Thomas is priced all the way up to 6'1". I'm not sure we can get there. Matchup-wise, it makes sense. He's actually been rock solid, and he did play 32 minutes in that last game against Xavier, pulled down 10 rebounds. Don't hate the play by itself in a vacuum, as they say, but I think it's a little bit of a higher price. I'd rather play Davis. And then you have really nothing else. Finley Bizjack, Andre Screen, not really going to be messing around with those plays too much. All right, final game on the slate, and this is an absolute doozy. Tubby says a press conference in the morning. Musselman and Scott Drew rumors. Scott Drew, really? I don't know about that. I don't know about that, man. But Musselman, I've heard those. I don't think Drew's going to leave Baylor anytime soon. Maybe. All right, and Johnny says, I'm here for the Stanford game. Man, the reason we're not going to talk much about the 12-game main is because they didn't have pricing up yet. But I'm here to tell you, we don't care. I'm just kidding. I'm not Stephen A. Smith. Stanford versus Cal is going to be an absolute high target game for me on that slate. Jalen Tyson, easy. Fardaws Amick, easy. I might just take the Cal starting 5 there against your Stanford team and just count up the money that we win off of stacking against them, because Cal is going to bring it. It's going to be Brian. All right, Oregon State versus UCLA. This is what happens when you don't sleep much, man. This is the version of me you get. So I hope you guys like it. All right, UCLA 6-point favorites. I don't know about that. Total, get ready for this. We've got a real barn burner on our hands. 127.5 total. Whoo, that is a barn burner. So UCLA, let me just give you my spiel on UCLA real quick. Coming into the season, people were like, UCLA is a contender in the Pac-12. This is a top 2 team. They're going to go to the dance. Mick Cronin's got this great roster. And I'm sitting here like, what the hell are people talking about? This roster's terrible. They lost people. Their best transfer get was Lazar Stefanovic, who's actually been great lately. Don't get me wrong. And then a bunch of unproven international players with major upside, but are raw as hell, super raw. I mean, we're talking about they throw the steak on your plate and the thing is mooing at you. That's how raw some of these kids are. So it's not a surprise to me to see UCLA struggle like this. Mick Cronin has a lot of work to do, and it's pretty inexcusable for the roster to look this way. And that's not to say like there's not talented players on this roster, but when you have to give Will McClendon big minutes, kind of shows you where they're at with this team and just the overall failure of Mick Cronin letting down the Bruin faithful. With that being said, historically matchups against Oregon State have been elite. They've been a team that we can pick on and have some pretty nice results. Now, they've got some solid fantasy performers themselves, and UCLA in the past has been a team we don't necessarily want to target against too much, and defensively, they've got their ability, but this isn't a spot where we need to avoid them by any means. Now, this won't be a game that I'm actively looking to target. This will be a spot where if I fall into a last man in situation, I'll take somebody from this game, but I will not start with this game. Last time these two teams played, UCLA did win 71-63. Tyler Bilodeau had an 18-6 performance, which was pretty solid. Jordan Pope had 14-2. Dylan Andrews had 18-4-3. Lazar Stefanovic had 15-2. Adim Bona had 18-4. So overall, nothing really spectacular to speak of. On the Oregon State side, prices are fair. Bilodeau at 7-2. It's reasonable. I think he is the best overall play on the Beavers. I think that you don't have to worry about as much foul trouble here in this one. A lot of the times he gets those fouls later in the game. High usage rate, especially in conference play, definitely somebody you can look at, but again, not starting with him. Jordan Pope, high usage guard. He's okay at 7K. If anybody on this team I'm going to realistically use and feel okay about it, it's going to be Dexter Akano sitting there at 5'6". That range is to value. Anything under 6K at this point with the way DK pricing is, we got to consider that a value option. So Akano at 5'6", that's where we're going to be looking, where he has scored 21 plus fantasy points in 3 straight games. And that's against the likes of Oregon, Utah, and Colorado. Not exactly like, Virginia level defenses by any means, but not slackers either, except maybe Utah. So he's performed quite well. The minutes are up. We did see some injuries to him earlier in the season, kind of slow to get back. Missed a few games here in the middle part of the year, got back in the starting lineup, and his minutes have been trending up ever since, and his overall rates have been as well. 26% usage rate in 2 of those last 3 games, and he's handling a lot more, and he's very, very aggressive, especially lately. So I do like Akano here, and I that's the type of last man in I'm talking at 5'6". Not probably going to have 7-2 to land on Bilodeau. I'm looking there at Akano. On the UCLA side, Bona's there at 7'9". That is a price that I don't love, especially when he was just 6'3". He came through for us against ASU. I did have to use him. I haven't been a big fan of his. I don't use him that often. He tends to be relatively chalky. Don't think we'll see that at this price of 7.9. Will be interesting to see where he lands there. Elite overall rim protection and rebounding rates. Oregon State has a myriad of front court personnel that they can throw at Bona to try and frustrate him and get him into foul trouble. At the very least, they'll be hacking him. Sebastian Mack, still the cheapest and most realistic option from a projection sheet standpoint. This is another one of those Jalen Sellers-esque plays where Mack's probably going to project well. I didn't get the UCLA numbers yet before the show, but at 30 minutes and 5.7 with his rates, he's going to project well, and you're just going to have to look at that and say, maybe he's a computer tricker type play. I can't use him either. Same with Sellers. And Sellers and Mack have tended to be relatively chalky, and I expect them to garner ownership even though they've been pretty soft the last few games. Mac did put up 24.5 against Washington State a couple of games ago, but then he went right back to sub 20 fantasy point performances against Arizona and Arizona State. So pretty tough to trust him right now, and he was awful against Oregon State in their win. He actually got benched midway through that game because his defense was just so terrible they couldn't keep him on the floor. Dylan Andrews, probably the best overall play, but he's 6'6". Don't love that. That would be a last man in type of situation / scenario. He is playing a ton of minutes, and his rates have ballooned up quite a bit over the last few weeks. Let's pull up UCLA's team page here. Right now, his total season numbers, 24.5% usage, shot rate, 22% usage rate. In conference play, though, those numbers have gone up. He's right around 25% shot rate, 23.5% usage rate. Both of those top 20 in the conference. Where he is able to take over games with his scoring, he's also got an ability to rack up other stats, such as assists. He has the 8th best assist rate in the Pac-12. Is shooting about 30% from long range. Not a lethal weapon there, but he is a legitimate option for a double-double with points and assists, which we did see him do against the Huskies just a few weeks ago when he dropped 44. Typically going to be somewhere in that mid-20s range, perhaps just a tad bit overpriced by 100 or two, but definitely a guy that I feel okay with. If you get there in the end with your last spot, you don't have to blow up your lineup to avoid him by any means. Then lastly, Lazar Stefanovic at 7-1. Again, their premium transfer portal get. He plays every minute, basically. So from a usage and playing time standpoint, he's fine. And he has been playing really well lately. And that's just because UCLA has such a lack of options on offense that he's had to take a ton of shots. And he's taking a ton of threes, has the green light from Mick to continue chucking. His peripherals can be sporadic. He has rebounded well. But overall, he's generally going to have to score. He's the type of option where I want to look at his point prop. If it's 13.5, 12.5, somewhere in there, I'll hit the over and probably not use him from a DFS standpoint. Do we want to use any of those UCLA values? Probably not. Brandon Williams, he could play 30 minutes and put up 3. Not really that interested in him at 3.2K. That is a cheap price. Obviously, he doesn't have to do a lot at that price to pay off, but he won't do a lot and won't pay off that price. You have Berkey. I had his name memorized going into the season, but I haven't talked about UCLA a lot, so his last name I can't really pronounce now. I had it all done back in November, but you're going to get the first name only, Berkey B. Played 23 minutes in that last game. That's interesting, but 4 points in that 23 minutes. Yet another raw prospect who might play 20-plus minutes and return less than 1x, perhaps 2x. Perhaps. And then you have the immortal Will McClendon, who was forced into big minutes in their last tournament run. Not really an option at 4-1 to be considered. They need guys in foul trouble, injured, various reasons there. Will McClendon doesn't get in, can't be used, not going to use him. All right, so that is the early slate, the 7-gamer there. Looking at the 12-game main, it's still in reserve status. So I don't have salaries to talk about there, but we will hit on maybe a couple of games there since we're running so well, so fast, so efficient here, not running this slate at 2 hours. All right, so let's talk about core. This is a interesting slate. There are a myriad of ways to go. I like it when it's kind of bunched up like this, but it is definitely easier to construct lineups than it was on today's early slate. So that being said, you can pretty much fit who you want to a degree. Core play number 1, and no surprise, as the posh play of the day, is going to have to be Posh Alexander. Recognize that it's an expensive price. I feel very confident that he is going to wreck Xavier. Now, they might not win, but it won't be because of him. So I'm expecting a huge game out of him. Core play number 2. Now, I really want Marcus Burton, and I'm going to use him as much as I can. But I will say at 4.8, Braden Shrewsbury in a favorable spot against Wake Forest has to be our core play number 2. That gives us some salary savings, high shot rate. that's just a blatant misprice. He hasn't been the best DFS option in the world by any means, but sub 5K with 30 plus minutes and a green light to chuck from Coach Dad, he has to be in our lineup. So that's core play number 2. And then number 3, it's going to be a USC guard. Now, for me, that means Boogie Ellis at 7.5. And a lot of that's going to be construction-wise. If I have a few hundred more to get to Collier, perhaps I'll consider that. But I think you want one of the primary USC options from Collier, Boogie Ellis, or Kobe Johnson. 7.5 for Ellis just fits what I'm going to want to do. And I'm just kind of wired to take the cheapest of the 3 when production is relatively similar or expected output is the same or close. I'm going to go with that discount. That means Boogie Ellis. Will be trying to find my way to either Marcus Burton or Keon Brooks, who I love both almost equally. Probably a little bit more towards Keon Brooks since I can get some Notre Dame exposure through Shrewsbury. But ignoring Burton there at that 7.8 price point is an utter mistake. You don't want to do it. I don't think he'll be under 15% owned like he's been every other slate this year. I think you see some ownership, so keep that in mind as you're building. All right, PrizePicks wise, let's just check the updated board. Now they're doing this goblins and demons thing where get some bonuses on certain points. So they have Hunter Couture at 9.5 points, which is the goblin. And then they have 14.5 points, which is the demon. So you get certain bonuses for that. I do obviously love the Couture number at 9.5. That's going to be way too cheap. He struggled, but he has a license to chuck. We know that. And I think we're going to see him eclipse 9.5 points quite easily. I would probably not have the Couture over 14.5 as a main look. It's in play, but over 9.5, you can sign me up for that. I'm pretty high on Couture from that standpoint. I don't know that his fantasy total will be that great, but I do think he scores 10 plus points. There is a goblin number on Sean Padula as well at 14.5, and his demon number at 19.5. Very strange to talk like this. I do like over 14.5 points for Sean Padula for what it's worth. All right, let's scroll down here. We have an under that I want to hit. I just want to make sure we're getting our best possible number. Noah Waterman. So his regular numbers at 6.5. They have one up here at 9.5. Can you even take unders on those? I think you can. Under 9.5 points for Noah Waterman. BYU is just too deep. I mean, we went over it. They have like 15 options at every position. It's gotten ridiculous. Our model has finally caught up there with enough data to where it's not shoving those plays down our throats. So I'm just not on any of those guys, but Waterman is the one that I'm taking unders on. Now, Rice is playing Wichita State, which should be a game where very little defense is played. It's a shame it's not on the slate. We're going to be hitting some props from that one. Max Fiedler, who I love, is a Derek Walker S-type player, and if you don't know what that means, for Nebraska last year, this front court option who acts as a quarterback, can hit jumpers, can put it on the deck, can make passes, hit threes, do a lot of different things. Fiedler fits that bill. Now it's 10.5 points against Wichita State. I'll be taking the over on that one. Let's take a peek at his PRA because he's a stat sheet stuffer as well. It's 23.5. I love this spot for him against Wichita State. So I'll take the over 23.5 PRA for Max Fiedler as well. All right, moving on down here. Let's take a look at some of these Wake Forest Notre Dame numbers. Boopy Miller over 20.5 PRA. This is the spot to go back to Boopy. I think it's a little bit harder because it's 6'7", but I will take that prop on him. And probably, let's take a peek at his points here. It was 14.5 earlier, I believe. $13.5. Okay, yeah. So over 13.5 points for Kevin Miller. That's kind of the money range there, like 12.5, 13.5, up to 14.5 points for scorers like that. Taking the over 13.5, that's just a typically profitable prop to hit over. Definitely like that one. Shrewsbury has a goblin number at 9.5, also like that. All right, so for content, actually, let's get into the main. So the main slate is 12 games before I talk about content and what we're doing the rest of this week. It is a myriad of game types here. Georgetown versus Providence, solid. Rutgers versus Maryland, not solid. Vanderbilt versus Arkansas, exciting. Kansas State versus Texas, not very exciting. So it's, up and down games here. It's going to be interesting to see how the pricing is. The DVP spot of the slate there, Penn State's playing Michigan. Michigan no longer has Oliver Mkwa, who's injured out for the season. That leaves us with Terrace Reed. Might be one of the first times all season I will be on Terrace Reed, but I'm certainly going to be looking at him against Penn State. California, mentioned that earlier, playing Stanford. A mini Cal stack against Stanford is very much in play. These early few rounds of conference tournaments, they're the bad teams, right? Quote unquote. That's a relative term, but bad teams. The ones that are awful on defense, don't shoot particularly well, turn it over all the time, dribble off their foot, just not very good basketball teams. So we have games like Missouri versus Georgia. Two relatively bad teams that are playing against each other. Dylan James versus Missouri. That's going to be a big play for me. BC's going up against Clemson. I like the Clemson side there. We'll see how pricing shakes out. Cincinnati, who absolutely destroyed over the weekend for us against West Virginia. Then we kind of came back down to earth with fouls with Johnny Newman. They're going up against Kansas. The Jayhawks will be without Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson. I think they'll bow out of the Big 12 earlier. This is an excellent opportunity for the Bearcats to smack them in the mouth. I do not foresee Kansas going far in this tournament without their top two guys. I do think Cincinnati mini stack is back in play, and nobody will have it. We'll see if they're priced up. Day Thomas is a absolutely ridiculous, just monster now, and it's probably going to be priced at like $9K. And then the slate finishes up with Arizona State versus Utah, two very lowly teams. The Utah side there is going to be tasty at all sides. Davon Smith probably be priced up, should absolutely wreck those Sun Devils. Like that spot there, and we'll see what we come out with. But also Jaden Epps, who is a very high usage guy. Ed Cooley lead guards, always fantasy aficionados and big time, stat producers. I know it's Providence, but they're tired, they're gassed, they're injured. Do like Jaden Epps there without seeing prices. That's kind of the quick rundown of that 12-game main slate. Content for you in the Discord and the site over the next 24 hours. There will be a early slate write-up, basically recapping what we've talked about, player pools, and a projection sheet. There will also be a breakdown for the 12-gamer, which also includes a player pool and a projection sheet. Don't have to ask. Every single slate the rest of the season will have projections, will have a player pool, and every single main at the least will have a write-up as well. Just so happens that tomorrow's two main slates and early will have a write-up for all. Content. We'll be back on Friday night to cover all the remaining Saturday action, then back Saturday night to talk about the last few games of Sunday, and then we're back Sunday afternoon, early evening, whatever the time is for you, on Selection Sunday, talking about the bracket, who got left out, who was a surprising put in, who's the pairings, what's the seedings, where'd they mess up, all that good stuff. Lots going on. Very excited. No sleep until May, and that is for all of us. If I'm staying up, you guys got to stay up too. All right, appreciate everyone who continues to support the show. On your way out, please hit that like button. Begging for likes is lame. Don't make me do it. Please just help us out. It helps the FTN Network tremendously. Look for me to be on RotoWire satellite, fantasy satellite show, doing their league draft here soon. Also, Chris Meany, just the man of FTN, he is going to be having some CBB shows on his daily show, so will be some appearances there with Randall, Cutry, and myself. We'll be posting that on Twitter, Discord, and all socials, so you guys can follow all that stuff. 'Tis the season for all things college basketball. Thanks again, everybody who continues to support the show, and we'll see you Friday night, same time, same place. I'm out.